Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
The Appalachians. What's the deal with the region? And why are so many people scared shitless of it? I'm a Euro-poor, so I'm clueless on the local tales. From what I've heard, it's a pretty spooky place. Anyone got stories to share?
I think it's two main features which the mountains use. One, their sense of age. No ritual can impress something so ancient. Your wealth is temporary. The scattered mining towns, the crashed plains, the grown-over roads can be found deep in the forest where no man now walks. The peaks towered above the Alps and the Rockies in their time, but now they are bent over with rocky spines bare in the air. You will live and die tilling the rocky soil, and you are nothing to a single ridge or creek. 2. The environment itself. The Appalachians don't really peak like a lot of mountains. It's this constant rolling hill, ridge, and creek set up everywhere, which means no matter where you are, you cannot see everything. If you go out into the hills at night, you never can feel like you have the upper hand or can see everything. This constant feeling of being watched. Climbing up a mountain just gives you a vision of more peaks, where the unknown hides behind, waiting for you to falter. The ghostly balds where the forest ceases suddenly, and you stand naked and wind-beaten. The shale barren where no water falls. A razor-sharp creek bottom. Appalachian is beautiful, but it is a beauty that knows you better than yourself. It is wisdom as a weapon. It is the knowledge that you must die. Man claims to be ready to die, but when you walk between the pine trees, where a dead buck lies surrounded by the mushroom, and hear the mountain lion offer the cries of the slit throat to an empty heaven, you know if you are truly ready to have your blood's redness disappear in the clean water of the creek and be less than nothing, never born.
Glad someone said it. The terrain itself lends to hiding things from you. I went there, and my local friend, who lived in a house with literal holes in it leading to the outside, not windows but like holes in the walls, told me that this beeping noise echoing over the hills was the call of a black panther, and that it was calling because I was new there. I'm not gullible. I know this guy wasn't trying to trick me. Him and his whole family swore they would see black panthers everywhere and that they could teleport and turn into a lady. I was there, alone, without him, and heard the noise, and it moved. I thought maybe it was some equipment someone was running, but it was coming from an area with no buildings and no work sites, and it moved closer. Also, some other people, many counties over, who didn't know my friend, also warned me of the cats, and I saw a stack of rocks with a cat skull on it. I did my best to research this, and found what I will write on a sign on my property to warn passers-by. Warning: there are no friendly cats in these woods. There are no beautiful women in these woods. Do not look in its eyes. Do not hear it speak. No whistling. Leave before dark.
Oh yes, there are definitely black panthers in Appalachia. I saw one prowling along a mountain road once when I was like 12. My family didn't see it, but I did.
Your pick looks almost comfy to me. Would gladly choose one of the not too dilapidated houses out there, maintain it, and live there. But I guess the feel probably comes from having lots of rundown places added to the wilderness and the fact that it's foreign to you, and most stuff you've heard comes from /x/shit. But that itself certainly is not unique to the Appalachian. I know some places as a Europoor myself that have kind of that vibe too. There's just broadly, I suppose, a particular apocalyptic feel, sometimes straight scary, in rundown rural areas, especially when you've been around the place when it had more life and it's tied to your very own family.
Or the laughing children and singing at night that happens along the Appalachian Trail. I went to West Virginia and Kentucky with my friends when they went to a family reunion one summer in our late teens. That being watched feeling never stopped up there. When me and the older brother of my friends went to get one of their aunts from the old home place, we saw a big shape and then an entire tree torn out of the ground thrown right in front of us on those bombed-out roads. The oldest living member of their family said the fairies and yahoos in the woods are everywhere there. The area I was in had literal unicorns and centaurs roaming in it. The depictions everyone is thinking of right now are very wrong. Unicorn. the biggest horse-like thing I have ever seen. It's bigger than a Clydesdale with thick body proportions and a dusty gray or dark cream hide. There's a large thorn-like horn starting on top of its muzzle and ending up between the eyes. It's kind of like a rhino horn. They are extremely territorial. Horses won't go near them. Centaur. It's got the legs of a horse and the tail and body of a stag, but where the deer's neck should be is actually where a humanoid torso is. Torso, arms, and hands are human-like, but the face has a short muzzle with nose slits and the eyes are animal-like with ear tufts on top of the head. Every inch except for the hooves and palms of the hands are covered in fur. Horses love them. Sometimes they come out in the early morning and play with the horses before going back to the woods.
But why do they worship them or get out of it?
They seem to think the unicorn being out there was a holy sign, that the unicorn itself was a holy thing that could grant blessings. So they praised and worshipped the unicorn in hopes of getting all kinds of things. Some of them thought the unicorn would give them magic powers. Some of them thought it would make the worshippers healthy and prosperous. Some of them even thought they could become a unicorn someday. One by one, every house within a 20-minute drive was full of unicorn stuff. There were unicorn things everywhere. Statues, books, artwork, plushies, headgear, etc. This happened even in houses with no women or kids, just adult men. The cult had a strong foothold in the area. I agreed with the horses. I stayed away from it as much as possible. The lack of unicorns in my home made it obvious I wasn't buying in, though. Eventually, they decided to band against me. My walking stick was stolen, my cat was killed, and I found someone messing with the car. The guy messing with the car was a known unicorn cultist. I got the hell out of the area as soon as I could. I only contacted people out there one time after I left. I left some things behind and wanted to go get them. I was told my stuff was gone. Then she asked me, "Do you like unicorns yet?"
What's a Yahoo?
Think Bigfoot with a baboon-looking head that eats people and attacks travelers. The first time you see one, your piss curdles in you. It's terrifying. If you are trespassing into Bigfoot territory, most of the time they just pitch rocks. They don't try to hit you. They just pitch them near you. If you don't turn around and go back, the rocks get bigger and closer. As a final warning, a Bigfoot will grab any random small animal and tear it to pieces and leave it on the trail, where you can't miss seeing it. If you still don't take the warning and turn around to go back, then you get torn to pieces. Helps to declare intent if egress isn't immediately available, just passing through sort of deal.
It's not that scary. I went out with a chick who was scared of a dirt road in my suburban town in a slightly more rural section of woods. City folk are programmed by the media to think dangerous hillbillies will kidnap you, attack you, and feed you to the pigs. I'm sure the people up there are very nice. I guess my main concern if I was driving through it as a visitor was, if my car broke down, would I get cell service, and could I get a tow to a place that could actually fix my car? But I'm poor, so I doubt I'm going to be visiting anytime soon, and this should be a legitimate source of anxiety anywhere you go.
It's not the people, it's the place. The physical geography of the Appalachians itself creates the aura. Something lives there other than humans. You can feel it if you travel there. I've had experiences there. My friends have. It's a very weird place.
Yes, I live there. I am posting from there IRL. This is a place of the living. Life surrounds us from the sky to the earth. It is alive. Urbans can't handle the abundance of life. They need their dead concrete and sterile steel. It's nothing for me to be traveling as part of my day and see deer, foxes. Hell, there is a family of mink near work. Urbans can't handle it.
I was born and raised there, grew up wandering around the forest by myself and getting lost, but I never felt afraid like you're talking about. That said, I always had a sense to not cause any unnecessary damage, like being careful not to step on flowers and not breaking branches that were in my way if I could go around. It felt important to be respectful to the environment, even though my parents or anyone else never taught me to do that. I think having a good soul is a part of it. Another part of it is you are probably just used to it. I'm not saying that I ever felt afraid. I regularly hike by myself and rarely encounter anything I'm afraid of. It's more a sense. I feel the same way about my grandma's attic where I saw a ghost as I do in West Virginia. That attic always puts a tingle in my spine. The ghosts in that house were actually pretty cool. They just did their thing. But you could tell they were there. Same thing as West Virginia. I think if you are a shitty person, you draw shitty energy to you, and Mothman might give you a visit. But if you are cool, Bigfoot will leave you to yours. The other thing about West Virginia is the people, and I'm not talking about rednecks or hillbillies or whatever. They are fine. I'm talking about glowies. They are all over West Virginia, from congressional doomsday bunkers to massive satellite dishes visible from the interstates. The one thing that Paulides doesn't talk about with his missing persons cases is the presence of feds. For some reason, where there is paranormal shit and strange cases of missing persons, the feds are usually nearby. It's not the people in the sticks that creep me out the most. It's some of the people in Morgantown and Charleston.
They're home to two of the most soulless tourist traps in the US, Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge.
Haven't been there in decades. They used to be fun back in the 80s. Then again, so was Vegas, which is just the very pit of hell now, that they don't even try to gloss over anymore.
LMAO, I live around an hour away from there, and that area is hellish. I'd say it deserves a mini nuke, but then it'd fuck up the mountains and probably create some cryptids.
Once the fire scorched Gatlinburg, the city voted to open up business and change their unincorporated status. All the mom and pop shops soon flipped to be owned by Patels, and chain restaurants and retail took over. It was genuinely a fun little town in the 80s to 2000s.
No, it's more than that. I have a herd of deer where I live. I regularly hear coyotes. Wild rabbits are everywhere. The Appalachians are different. It's not just an abundance of nature and wildlife. It's old, very old. There are places like Serpent Mound in southern Ohio, Moundville, West Virginia, the underground lakes in Tennessee, Mammoth Cave in Kentucky. There are tons of archaeological sites that don't make sense. There are old, sophisticated civilizations lying under the soil and rock there. The spirits there affect you, and they are powerful. There are wild people. There are creatures there we don't understand. The land there is truly sacred.
Red pill me on Moundville.
Big-ass Indian burial mound there, probably related to the Aduna people, purportedly held giant skeletons. State of West Virginia decides to build a massive Gothic prison next to it for some reason. West Virginia's like, you know what? This is also a great place for an elementary school. No shit. There is literally an elementary school next to both the prison and the Indian burial mound. Prison is abandoned now and haunted. Someone erects some kind of Freemason obelisk on top of big-ass Indian burial mound. About 1,000 people proceed to die in that prison. Charles Manson's mother was incarcerated there for 10 years. Manson visited there as a kid. Massive riot there in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. Prisoners and prison guards die. Most haunted room is the Sugar Shack, a relatively unguarded recreation room where prisoners were systematically Christian. U.S. Senator sends explicit letters to white nationalists, the leader of the 1986 prison riot. The prison museum has them in their possession by want release until her death, likely Democrat Kay Hagan. Said U.S. Senator is purported to conduct conjugal visits there with said prisoner. How this is actually a thing, who knows? Like literally an elementary school U.S. Democrat senator messing with a white nationalist prison gang leader who murdered guards. Charles fucking Manson, whose family is from that area. Native American burial mound, Gothic-ass prison built in the 19th century that was a death sentence to over 1,000 prisoners. Predictably haunted. Hundreds of YouTube videos about it. Watch the YouTube videos. The place is Skinwalker Ranch on crack. You can take a tour and even schedule an overnight stay if you want.
What is it about West Virginia and being haunted as hell? Add in the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum in Point Pleasant, Mothman, and things just keep getting weirder and weirder.
I have a friend that works there, trying to score an overnight in the asylum. Regarding Moundville, it honestly seems like the HQ of some kind of paranormal death cult. Similar to Serpent Mound, what is at Moundville in modern times seems intentional. I have no idea how anyone could have found Serpent Mound if they weren't looking for it. Some random Harvard professor was just stumbling around in rural Ohio in the early 19th century and discovered an earthwork that's perfectly astronomically aligned to the solstices, that's pretty much invisible from the ground level, covered in trees, and on the top of a cliff. That sounds like bullshit to me. And across the Ohio River you have this massive burial mound that seems like a perfect place to build a Gothic prison in the 19th century where people can just go missing, and no one questions it. And yeah, let's just erect an obelisk on the top there too. Colonists knew these sites were there and went looking for them. It seems like the whole serpent cult stuff from China and Mesopotamia was active in the New World. My belief is that these places, Moundville Prison, Trans-Allegheny Asylum, were covers for some dark occult practitioners who had access to some very ancient knowledge of the New World.
I think people in West Virginia drink and do drugs as self-medication to cope with the area's energy. The energy there is intense. If you live there, you probably are used to it. But it's an area where I believe the geography forms the people, not the other way around. I'm not shitting on the people there, I've loved everyone I've met there. But it's an intense heaviness. I suspect some dark stuff buried in history happened, and it still affects the people there. Also, yeah, I know more than a few people that have seen Mothman type of stuff.
Shepherdstown in the eastern panhandle on the Potomac is supposed to be the most haunted town in America. I've only been there once, comfy town with shops and restaurants. Some artist and hippie types there have a very different vibe than the rest of the state. Shepherdstown was basically an open-air field hospital during the Civil War. This is the likely origin of the paranormal activity.
I used to make my crew stay at the Wells Inn in Sistersville, supposedly extremely haunted but never saw anything. I think I saw something like corpse candles on a neighboring mountain one night, but otherwise always saw humans as a larger threat than anything else. Not sure I get this thread. I've traveled West Virginia quite a bit, more than most people ever will, and it's generally comfy. There are drug addicts and some bears, but if you carry a gun or two, it's a non-issue. Some places are barren, abandoned farms, fallow fields, empty trailers, and only a few old families left. But I never had otherworldly feelings here. It was something I could experience in urban areas nearly as well. Lowland swamps always were better at creating a genuine sense of dread and unease. Only there have I heard things that I could not rationalize and ran as if my life depended on it.
Staying at a hotel in the middle of a town that the owners claim is haunted to get tourist bucks is a bit different from heading out into the middle of the sticks away from people.
A lot of people from the outside don't differentiate hillbillies from rednecks. Urbanites on the East Coast are the worst at this. Very true. Also, we actually differentiate very hard out in the hills and mountains. There's a few basic kinds of folks you'll find, and they tend to stick to others like themselves. Have a primer. Mountain men. Often Scots-Irish or German roots, strong sense of community and sharing, highly values hard work and effort used to create things. If you get a few of these together with the right materials, you can build literally anything. Aloof to outsiders, extremely friendly once you're in, usually highly intelligent. Hillbillies. Other ethnicities who integrated into the mountain-type culture, but never quite as accomplished at making things as the mountain men. They like to think they can do anything, but really usually end up calling on a mountain man to get things done. Friendly to outsiders, but it's a mask. They are actually very insular and will reject anyone not like them. Not as intelligent as mountain men, but tend to have their own world smarts, so they aren't exactly stupid either. Rednecks. Jeff Foxworthy may have been joking, but he was dead on correct. Holier-than-thou morons who love things that go boom, Murica, and Jesus. Often broke as a joke and end up as junkies later in life. Tend to die from drugs, accidents, or health problems. Barely able to hold it together and proud of it somehow. Junkies. People strung out on meth, pills, and God only knows what else. Sometimes they got started out of boredom. Sometimes it was a medication that they got hooked on. Either way, we all know how this will end. On the bright side is there's not many people around. Everyone knows where to look when the thefts start. Farmer, our version of an urbanite. Many come from families where they were told they are privileged to be a farmer, so they think they are better than everyone else, yet they seem to know even less than hillbillies about life skills. Some are actually urbanites who went country thinking it was going to be so much nicer and purer. Generally distrustful of everyone and the first to turn on you for a quick buck. Distrusted by hillbillies and mountain men, folk witches. Yes, they exist. Before we had easy access to vets and doctors, you went to witches if something went wrong and a mountain man couldn't fix it. Generally loved and respected by hillbillies and mountain men, but hated and feared by rednecks. Some of them are actually mountain men. It's just their specialty is folk magic. We'll teach if you're willing to work hard to learn, but most don't put in the effort. Wiccans. These either went to the country like the farmers or came from redneck families and wanted out of the death spiral, useless for actual magic, but still kept around as they generally are helpful as peacemakers. If there's a library, community center, or other free public access thing around, it's probably run by them. If lucky, they become folk witches. It's rare, though. Immigrants, usually hardworking people who don't cause trouble. Also skittish because rednecks treat them like dirt. If they hold on to their former country identity, expect them to open a convenience mart or ethnic restaurant. Eventually, these or their children end up as one of the other types, often a hillbilly, folk witch, or Wiccan. Hunters. Similar to the farmers, they went to the country because they seem to think people suck less out there. Either that or delusional thinking they can just Innawoods and ignore everyone else because they can live off the land. Wolf and deer stuff everywhere, has lots of guns, owns a lot of camo print, and yet almost never actually kills anything. Calls themselves a lone wolf, yet doesn't understand that lone wolves literally are outcasts who are going to die if they don't join a pack. The redneck's crazy and/or furry cousin, Greentext. It's the redneck's weird lefty twin that also loves things that go boom, America and getting high, but is usually atheist and stands up for everything the redneck hates. Owns and uses guns, ATVs, and other equipment. Actually hunts, is likely an active environmentalist, is at least semi-educated, and is less likely to end up as a junkie. Hated by hunters and rednecks. Misfit toy. Someone unlucky to be born in the middle of nowhere or to have had family drag them out there. They clearly do not belong at all. Not an inept, they just don't fit in. Sometimes they find a niche as the local video store or comic book guy, but they usually get out of the area as soon as they turn 18. Hippie, fairly rare. Usually these end up as folk witches, hunters, or Wiccans. These try to be self-sufficient but often have social rules that are made to experiment or challenge the norm, so mountain men tend to laugh at them. Can earn respect if they stop acting like they are better than everyone else, otherwise are benign yet annoying. Cultists, the cancer of the mountains, rare, but when it pops up it will quietly spread until it has consumed or killed everyone. Sometimes these pose as hippies, but more often they show up pretending to be rednecks. They get popular, then start spreading their influence. Cultists are part of why rednecks are so paranoid about any non-Jesus faiths. Some cults picked up on this and made Jesus-type cults. Example, Branch Davidians of Waco. If it smells like cult, it is one. Be wary. Tradesman. The farmer's rarer cousin, someone who took up a trade that they know will get a 100% loyal base out in nowhere. Plumbers, auto mechanics, veterinarians, etc. These usually live on the edge of a small town and not in the mountains or hills themselves. Rednecks and farmers call them city folk, but if they aren't hiring hillbillies or mountain men, they hire one of these. May eventually also fall into one of the other classes depending on personality. Don't judge their skills based on the building. Talk to the locals, they will give you the truth. And that's all I can think of at the moment. Tips about rednecks. Rednecks are loud, run in groups, and can get very nasty if they don't like you. They give most rural folk a bad name. People who aren't rednecks hate being called one. The easiest way to tell if someone is a redneck is to ask, "Do you know any rednecks?" A redneck will almost always proudly admit to being a redneck, assume you are one, then try to introduce you to the other rednecks. Anyone else will start naming off the rednecks in the area, or they will talk about how not everyone is a redneck. If still in doubt, say something like "Praise Jesus" in response to whatever they said. A redneck will be very happy with you. Others will think you are a redneck, however, so only do this if you're fairly sure it's a redneck but want confirmation.
Another mountains anon here, lived in the mid-Atlantic foothills as a kid, lived in upstate New York and southern Tior, and now live in Shenandoah Valley. Traversed rural Pennsylvania and West Virginia many a time. A few anons here have good insight experiences, and will try to touch on common themes. Old place. This you can feel if you know how to look for it from growing up here or similar places elsewhere. The ancient boulders on mountainsides that haven't moved in millennia. The waterways that can change dynamically from full-on catastrophic flood to bone-dry creek bed come fall, and the way the air and sky feel when the sun leaves so quickly behind the hills in winter. Deep time is extremely present here, so it pays to know the land. Urbans do hate this, but even natives know there are places you've got to respect, like the ocean. More powerful than you and just as uncaring. Socioeconomic status, definitely a thing too. Anons knowing actual history of Native Americans, colonial frontier settlement, corporate exploitation and environmental destruction, and industrial collapse and drug wave is good. Many people here who have had little were treated like shit by outsiders and greedy elites, and then lost much of what little they had. The kindness and hard-working spirit comes from hubris of knowing the land and your part in it, basically nothing, see old. The creepy malice from misplaced, fuck-it-style, unearned pride, and very well-earned resentment from getting screwed over. This applies to everyone all in different ways. Cryptids. Also definitely a mix of legitimately strange, hard-to-explain shit, tourism tall tales, moonshiner propaganda, and just general critters. My wife hates when I practice prey distress calls in the house, but hearing coyotes at night or the shrieks of an actual dying animal out in the woods creeps me out on occasion. Easy to fabricate stories when the land and desperate poor folks, druggies and poachers give you so much to work with. But even in full summer, broad daylight, coming across an abandoned rotting cabin in what you thought was a wild forest can give immediate, powerful feelings of nope. Sometimes you do get turned around on a trail, even with a map. Good luck getting service almost anywhere worth hiking or camping. And then you realize how alone in the old hills you are. Or how alone you wish you were, feeling like something is there with you and you don't know whether it's a meth head, a critter, or something less normal or natural. Geology. This is an interesting thing for /x/activity. There are definitely areas that were hard to map for a while, such as the Adirondacks because of ore deposits interfering with compasses or electronic equipment. You also have a lot of limestone at various points, which depending on your area can make extensive cave systems, deep hollers and draws, and weird surface waterways like the Susquehanna River system or New River. Fertile flatlands with sudden cliffs, mountainsides, or deep lakes nearby. You get lots of edge habitat, where human settlement directly abuts extensive undeveloped land. This may lead to a higher rate of interaction with spoopy phenomena. One more thought, linked to old, native experience. This area has been settled for a long time. The Great Warrior Path from roughly northern Georgia to upstate New York and Vermont was not just trod by indigenous warbands and traders long before Europeans came, but literally by mammoths and giant sloths and shit. Look up Osage orange or pawpaws, or even locust trees. The plants and the land evolved in extremely different circumstances from our modern times, and even the native people who lived here are almost immeasurably distant from their ancestors who came across the Bering Strait or on insane barks from Polynesia tens of thousands of years ago. Imagine being in a place with that level of spiritual or metanatural saturation. Only comparable places I can imagine are maybe the fertile Crescent and Taurus Mountains, central India, or parts of Europe where other people lived for much longer than sapiens. Places humans have inhabited for long periods of time. You can just tell. The veil is thin or thick, and you overlay that with weird topography and truly ancient environment, you're gonna see some weird shit.
My friend and I had a creepy Appalachian Trail experience one time. We had started in southwest Virginia and planned to hike the trail into northeast Pennsylvania. This incident happened in south-central Pennsylvania in Michaud State Forest. My friend brought the tent but forgot the rainfly. My friend liked looking up at the sky. I, however, had an uncomfortable feeling about it. My friend was a heavy sleeper and fell asleep almost immediately. I stayed awake, staring through the screen at the treetops above and tried desperately to fall asleep. Finally, I began to snooze. After what I assumed was a couple hours, a sound woke me. It was still dark. I lay there trying to figure out what had woken me up and strained my ears. That's when I heard a heavy thump, thump, thump directly next to the tent, like literally on the other side of me. I froze, terrified, and listened on. The thumps weren't close together. It was like there was one and then a 5-second pause and then another. Like whoever it was being intentionally creepy, or maybe just trying to be quiet. The thumps definitely sounded like they were either coming from a large man in boots or some enormous animal purposely stomping around. I didn't hear any heavy breathing or anything though that I usually associate with a bear or wolf. So anyway, I'm laying there, terrified out of my gourd, and I'm praying to whatever holy being there is that this thing doesn't come over and look in through the top of the tent. I mean, it was right next to us. It would have been so easy to just glance in. I wanted to wake my friend, but I didn't want to make any noise. So I literally laid there on my back all night long, heart in my throat, staring up through the screen at the trees, praying that the thing outside wouldn't look in at me. It never did from what I could see, and as soon as that sun rose, boy, we were out of there. I did a minuscule check of our surroundings when I packed up, but the area was very overgrown, and from what I could tell, there were no footprints. My friend thought I was crazy, of course, and he still denies hearing anything himself.
Last May, me and a few friends went backpacking in the Appalachian range of Pennsylvania. We started our trip in George Washington National Forest, Virginia, and eventually ended in Sussex County, New Jersey. Most of the hike was along the Appalachian Trail. We had set up camp in the early afternoon in Pine Grove Furnace State Park near Fuller Lake. We each brought weapons for protection against bears or whatever may have shown up. Anyway, as it got closer to the evening at around 5 p.m., I was fishing in a creek about a quarter mile away from camp, and I started to smell something bad. I couldn't describe the odor. It was just bad. I heard some rustling in the bushes about 200 yards away. It was quite clear that it was footsteps from the sound. Almost thinking that it was one of my friends, I realized that they were south of me, so I started to panic. Whatever it was getting closer to my fishing spot, and the smell started getting stronger. My fishing pole was in my left hand, and my right hand was on my gun as I was getting ready to unholster it. I couldn't get over the smell, but at the same time, I was worried about my life. I kept my eyes focused in the direction of the loud footsteps. I can see a big open area, kind of like a pasture, about 50 yards away, which is where the footsteps are coming from. I see what I think is a man in a possible reddish-brown ghillie suit walking behind the trees on the edge of the open area. But the problem is that it was about 2 or 3 feet taller than me, as I'm only 6'2", which was unbelievable. None of my friends are close to my height, but that thing that I saw was built. I can see the muscle movement of its legs. I'm no expert on Sasquatch, but I do know what I saw was no bear, as it was walking on 2 legs, not in any way that I've seen. Both the legs and the arms are primitive and built like an oversized gorilla. The thing probably weighed about 900 pounds. It ended up vanishing as it went to my right in the deeper woods, but after the footsteps stopped, I heard what sounded like chatter, kind of like some sort of native Indian language. After the chatter stopped, the footsteps started up again, but it was footsteps going in one direction and another sound of footsteps going in the opposite direction. I never told my friends about the experience because I didn't want them to think that I was crazy. Some people might be skeptical about this, but I know what I saw and heard wasn't in the ordinary.
My belief is that these places were covers for some dark occult practitioners who had access to some very ancient knowledge of the New World. Love this idea. You made a good connection. For many years now, I've thought that there were ancient pre-flood civilizations other than Native American in the Americas. People who settled there relatively recently compared to natives, however long that is. Or at least Asians knew about the Americas in some capacity. Port trading colonies withdrawn, failed colonies and only ancient lore left over by the 1600s, or just legends of ancient visits. Adding your idea to my headcanon, though it doesn't need to be dark or occult, nor do I think it necessary to cherry-pick Serpent Mound among all the North American sites. Instead, it could simply be that early settlers, or they're more likely their leaders, knew about America's prehistory. Then, instead of just the propaganda manifest destiny and genocide, they were ordered to destroy the New World cities for other bigger reasons. These mounds and Cahokia, etc., are only scraps of what was originally in the Americas. Consider how Tenochtitlan was razed to the ground in short order, and now there are only traces left of that, mostly covered by Mexico City now. Yet Central and South America are loaded with ancient ruins. I think it was like that in the US, except the destruction was nearly complete. Maybe in density there were fewer large cities, so all were destroyed. South America had too many cities, so the destruction was not as systemic or complete. History erased. Short and giant people also inhabited the Americas. Were they the original natives? Were they colonists? I love pondering these scenarios. Maybe the Native Americans come from advanced Asians who fled Asia, but didn't keep up the advanced lifestyle and reverted to more down to earth. Or maybe they fled a cataclysm or tyranny and simply couldn't bring the awesome tech they used to have.
Pre-flood, probably not a lot of evidence. Post-flood, from about 9000 BC, yeah, it's buried. But if you travel through Georgia, Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, West Virginia, Ohio, and Alabama, you will find a ton of off-the-path archaeological sites. Genetic evidence is there and mostly covered up, but the Cherokee and Lumbee have DNA projects to try to explain anomalies in their DNA and to try to clear up their lineages. Best shot at pre-flood I've seen would be the purported megaliths in Montana. Although the levels of radon in places like Nebraska, Iowa, and Kansas have always been odd to me. You only get radon with radioactive decay, usually from granite. Not a lot of granite in these places, so that decay has to come from somewhere. Nukes? Just spitballing. But the Great Plains seems suspiciously lacking any archaeological sites more recent than the Mesozoic.
I watch a channel called Navajo Teachings. The elder said that Dine came from an advanced civilization that became decadent.
I doubt it. Immigration into America was more controlled than people realize. Up until the 18th century, it was mostly wealthy landowners and indentured servants. African slavery wasn't a thing until the mid-18th century. The book White Cargo by Don Jordan and Michael Walsh is the best well-researched source for an actual snapshot of early America settlement. It's more likely upper-class landowners already practiced some form of blood sacrifice and had an idea of what was in America. I don't view the Spanish Reconquista and the settlement of America as being separate events. Something drove Italy and the Pope to support Castile and Aragon to unite Spain, and immediately after completing the Reconquista, Spain didn't even pause to recover from war. They just pushed resources into America, likely because America was the goal all along, in my opinion. It wasn't discovered. They knew it was here and what they would find, maybe because Rome got records from the Byzantines before Constantinople fell in 1453, which would explain the Catholic support and push to liberate Iberia as a launching point to America. That's my present operative theory.
You turn on the radio in your car. Electric 94.9, a voice half sings, half screams. It's everywhere. You have been driving for days. You still see mountains. You are still listening to Electric 94.9. Everything is Electric 94.9. It's everywhere. You turn on the television. The same commercial plays over and over, begging you to vote for a certain candidate for the governor of Virginia. It's a different man every time, but it's the same commercial. His eyes grow more distant and empty with each iteration. You live in Tennessee. It's race weekend. I-26 has never been this full. The interstate is bursting at the seams. You've been in traffic for hours. You only wanted to go to the mall. You can never go to the mall. There is no mall. There is only Bristol Motor Speedway. It's race weekend. The Eastman plant in Kingsport smells like rotting cabbage. You can smell it for miles. Something watches from underneath the surface of the South Holston River. The water is dark, so dark. The lights from the factory reflect in the dark water like eyes. You hope those are the factory lights. The Carl Gregory dealership jingle permeates your existence. It wakes you in the morning and sings you to sleep at night. Carl Gregory Chrysler Jeep Dodge, you sing as you drive past the building on the Bristol Highway that now houses an AutoNation. You can't do better than that. You go to Food City. You vaguely recognize the cashier as someone you went to school with. He is hollow. He opens his mouth to ask you if you have a value card you'd like to scan, but only a distant-sounding wind comes out. Value every day. Food City. You don't know anyone who reads the Johnson City News and Neighbor. Come to think of it, you've never known anyone who subscribed to it willingly. The papers pile up at the bottom of your driveway anyway. No matter how many times you cancel your subscription, they keep showing up.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more Greentexts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check the Odyssey and Rumble pages for separate archives of previous broadcasts.